Hello and welcome to Straight Talk, Supply Chain Insights, the podcast for your supply chain leader who is on the go and wants to be in the know. And now, your host, Lora Cecere.
Welcome to Straight Talk with Supply Chain Insights. My name is Lora Cecere, and I'm the founder of Supply Chain Insights, and I interview supply chain leaders so that you can get the latest up-to-date insights from people that are working on innovation, creative ideas, and making a difference. Today, I'm interviewing Pat Byrne. He is the founder of Indico, and he comes to us from down under Australia. I love it. Pat and I met in my last class on outside-in processes, and he has a variety of experiences, and I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about himself, a little bit about his company, and then we're going to talk about the graph, because Pat is one of the few people that I've met in my travels that has a full working knowledge of the graph. Pat, introduce yourself. Let's do the short version because, you know, you and I are both gray hairs and we'll be here forever if we give me the long version. So tell the group a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I'm Pat Byrne. I've been studying systems thinking forever. I use it in every aspect of my journey in IT, telecommunications, food, and consumer electronics.
And you used to work for Samsung, right?
I joined Samsung when they were going through the Korean crisis in '97.
Yeah.
And that was an education and a half and forced a lot of systems thinking to survive, just to survive. But however, we got there.
Okay.
And yeah, go ahead.
So tell the group a little bit about your company, because you founded Indico and you've been working on some innovation in Australia with some Australian companies.
Yeah. So throughout my career as a CEO, I have always been frustrated with IT. One, our users couldn't specify it properly. Two, the technologists would take 6 months to do a 1 month problem, and by the time it was finished, the problem had changed.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay. So, Pat, you know, you're one of the most knowledgeable people that I've interviewed about the graph and about testing the graph. Tell me how you would define the graph to your mother or your family, you know, over table, you know, and just really common sense terms. You know, what is the graph?
Yeah. Imagine a map, not just of streets and cities, but imagine a map that rolls out roles, rules, relationships, goods, services, assets, pathways to market, inventory, pricing, availability, warehousing, and transport options. All of that can be mapped with graph. Now, bear in mind, this is how you organize the data. It's not got its own magic wand like ChatGPT that automatically does everything, but you can organize it so that everything is in context. What does that mean? No big data to clean up. If
Right.
everything is in context, then you don't need that. You can dive straight off a contextual level and say what's happening, who wants what, where, when, who has what, where, and when it's available, and then how do we get it there and fulfill it.
So I'm very excited about the graph as we think about outside-in processes and we think about the river of demand and the mapping of the relationships of the market drivers and the demand drivers. You know, I know you took the class. How do you see the graph and mapping the river of demand?
To use the graph, that's your question. Okay. So you need to have an architecture around what I just explained, the map. There needs to be an architecture, and if it's outside in, it has to be outside in, not inside out. What do I mean by that? That the problem is alignment. demand and supply. And if you take, I mean, let me compliment you, by the way, on these operational research stats that you put up.
Thank you.
Look at those orbital graphs. Now that immediately should have one great big sign across it: misalignment.
Yes. But is it organizational?
Misalignment.
Is it organizational alignment? Is it metrics alignment? Is it model misalignment? What is the misalignment that you think?
If I put it at a supply chain end-to-end basis, it's aligning with sell-through rather than sell-in. So
Yes.
if your whole basis is on sell-in and stuff to shelf, a lot of bad things are going to happen as a result of that. It may take months, it might even take a year, but it's going to bite you.
And so what are the bad things? You know, I liken it to writing a bad check. You know, it's like, you know, you don't get, you know, it's hard to pull up.
Inventory buffers that are now dying on the shelves in the warehouse each time they gather dust. That's more storage costs, it's more working capital tied up, it's price protection. You've got to drop the prices to get rid of it. It's going to hurt your operating margins, and the working capital that you're using is just growing. That's it's a compounding thing, and now you're chasing your tail because now you can't think of the innovation going forward. You've got to solve the problem from back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's the organization's on the back foot. But, you know, if I think about 40 years of evolution of ERP and advanced planning, you know, most people are comfortable being on that back foot. They don't understand the risk associated with sell in versus sell through. Even having the discussion is hard for me to have with most companies. So what do you think we do about it?
Well, first of all, we've got to show and tell. There's got to be demonstrative benefit by going down this route. So you have to have working demonstrations that will actually show how do you manage inventory across this chain? How do you share that knowledge? How do you align the supply chain to that? How do you share the knowledge across that spectrum? And then how do you foster collaborative decision making? That doesn't mean I'm giving away my CEO role to somebody in freight forwarding or where it's contract manufacturing. No, it's saying, hey, let's all focus on this sell through at the end of the rainbow. And if we do that together, we're all going to gain productivity, make productivity gains.
So how
And
long
that's operating margins, that's bottom line profit, that's less working capital requirement from the banks.
So how long have you been working with the graph?
Now it would be 5 years.
Okay.
Yep.
And
Yep.
has graph technology become more powerful?
Oh, yes. Yes.
In what ways?
And well, it becomes more and more malleable and more scalable. I mean, if we did a little graph today of Lora Cecere as a node in Supply Chain Insights, Pat Byrne as a node in Indico, with a little line going between them saying they're communicating, and then a vertical line coming down to a third node that says podcast. We've just made a graph network, right? We share that. And so it's very easy for non-technical people to write and specify the demand supply chain. And I don't mean supply chain planners, I don't mean CIOs, I mean the C-level executives who wear this They were the brunt of all this. Uh, in the past, they haven't been particularly interested in this, or that's the supply chain director's problem, right? But he's in a position where he has no power over sales or marketing, or for that matter, the IT department or the finance department, and we're expecting him to do Merlin on something he has no power in reality to influence in an end-to-end outside in. So it's got to go ahead.
So when I think about the graph, I think about the ability to visualize relationships, to see flow, and to basically move to a self-service model, right? We've got self-service HR. Why can we not have self-service planning?
Absolutely. And it should be no code.
Yeah.
There should be no code in this at all. If what we've just described as a small graph network, all we're talking about after that is scale. And so if we can get the actual business line managers selecting, configuring on a drag and drop basis what market they're in, what taxonomy they're using, what relationships they have, both demand and supply, all of that is possible in graph and not hard to do.
Well, how do people learn about it?
They really need to find webinars that are non-technical. People like Neo4j do some of that. They always preface their technical teaching with business language to start with. So you may not get all of the webinar, but you get the concepts, and give a good CEO or a sales director or marketing director or supply chain director that kind of information, and he starts to, or he or she starts to think in terms of what they could do with it. How would that apply to me?
Well, when I teach the class, people go, well, that's way too expensive. I mean, how expensive is it to build a graph?
To map the graph, not really. It's not, it's thousands. It's not tens of thousands. It's thousands. It's time. Now and that costs, but it's not, the capital cost is pretty low, and the usage is pretty low as well. But if what you do is take a graph and overlay it on the enterprise legacy system, you are not going to get what you want, and you're going to become very frustrated. Laura, you and I can remember when ERP systems came in. They were a brilliant servant. Today, they are the master. They actually constrain what management can do, and that's got to change. So if you take your premise of outside in, then let's start with that and say, okay, how do we align to that? Right? And that involves talking to your customers. It involves talking to your service providers, your contract manufacturers, all of that, right? And saying, now, how can we do this together? You'll be amazed how open people are to that. I mean, initially there's the, oh, yes, and the crossed arms with, what's he going to be asking for now? I'm talking about me. But once you get past that and say, listen, this is what we want to do. We want to align. We want to share the information. We both want to profit from the information. We've got ESG goals and so forth to do with this. We've got to share this information, essential information. Not that I see what's in Laura's wallet or Laura sees what's in my pocket, but the essential information that makes this chain work.
Well, and the other thing that I like about the graph is the evolution of AI for the graph. Have you been working on AI for the graph?
Yeah, so we apply AI neural networks. Now you're talking about a little more investment now. But we employ neural networks, and again, because of our background, we try to do it on the cheap, right? So I might get a little technical here now, but if you look at ChatGPT and the various other language models, they use a thing from Google called transformer architecture.
Right.
We've no need to go into that, except to say they grab everything on the net and bring it back and then try to look for context, structure, sequence, flows, form, and function, right? But if we could turn that on its head and have a neural network instead that dictates the context, structure, sequence, flows, but allows buyers and suppliers to self-organize and choose and select different strategies, different inventories and different locations, different markets, different pricing. That's where I believe graph can take us. And AI is absolutely tailored for that.
Right.
Come back to the no code. It's got to be no code. We can't wait for, when could I have this development? 6 months time. Can you do it in 6 months? If I have $100,000, if I give you $100,000, can you do it? Yes, but you'll have to reprioritize 3 other projects.
Well, and then, what do you want? And then people aren't clear enough, and the specifications are never, exactly right. And when you build it, it's out of date. How do people find out more about AI on the graph? If you were out there and you didn't know anything about the graph and you were stuck with traditional ERP and APS and you were curious, what steps would you take to learn?
I would go to ChatGPT and I would say, explain graph to me as a 10-year-old.
Okay, good idea.
As a 10-year-old. Now tell me how graph, still as a 10-year-old, could work in my demand planning and assured supply. How might it do that? Now, be aware that ChatGPT will give you its best guess.
Right.
It's right. So now you put that against your own domain expertise and say, well, that doesn't make sense. And the other thing is, ask it again and again and again in slightly different ways, and you will get totally different answers. Not rubbish answers, not trash answers, but just different contexts. What ChatGPT does is to look at the context of your question, how it's structured, what's the sequence, right? And what's the utility, the use and usage of the word bank, for instance. It could be a financial bank, it could be a river bank, there's all kinds. So it's looking at that, and it's got many eyes on the question. And then when it goes to look at the data within its domain, it does the same criteria. So depending on how you ask the question will depend on the answers you get, right?
Okay, so we've gone to ChatGPT and we've done some learning, and now we'd like to pilot or, test some of this concept. How do people get started without having to have huge projects and costs, and how do they get started?
I would say pick a problem child. And I don't mean a person, I mean a problem child, a product, something that it's a pain to just look at it, So pick on that and then have a team together, small team, that says, okay, let's map this out, right? There's going to be gaps. There's going to be,
So are these people data scientists? Who's on that team?
There was no data scientist on my team.
Were they
Right?
linguists?
I don't want a data scientist. I don't want initially a developer. I want to write down in a map with little nodes and arrows who's who in the zoo, where is who in the zoo, what does who in the zoo do, right? And when I have that on a whiteboard, and I can say, is that how the chain works? Is that how the demand supply system works? Right. Okay. So once you have that, now you have, and I'm glossing over some things here, but essentially, once you have that, you have the ability to inform a developer. This is our demand supply requirement. Here it is, rather than users being asked when they're under the pump for other things and now only half specifying. You have seen all this. I've seen it. It's all understandable. But if you can map out the chain, including transport, including warehousing, service areas, the inventories that you've got, where have you got them, all of that. Once you have that, you have a specification.
Well, but I'm hoping that we do it outside in, not inside out, right? Because so many people's paradigms are inside out, right? And making the shift from inside out to outside in is not trivial. So I'm hoping when people do that mapping, they think about outside in and the sell through and the relationships of the channel. And that's tough for a lot of people that aren't systems thinkers, right?
Yeah, because now if you're doing it with, and I've just thought of the solution, if you're doing this with sales, marketing, supply chain, finance, all are in that. You've got a team of rivals with not a particular need to make the other guy shine. So it has to be done at a level where the buck stops.
Well, but those functional groups are all inside out and don't realize it, right? Sales is very sales driven inside out. Marketing is not the same as market driven. And so we have to start with the outside in principles. Okay. So powerful AI on top of the graph is powerful, easy to use, not terribly expensive. You think it can lead to self-service. Anything I didn't ask you want to tell me or want to share with the audience?
The solution. Go get Cecere in to facilitate the workshop that maps out this. I'm not, hang on, don't laugh. I'm not, because you have all of the research from outside in to tell a CEO, here's your problem. And you have the expertise then that if you just quickly had a course on graph, to be able to guide that across the supply chain and have other people come in and say, oh, I didn't know that me doing that caused that.
Yeah. Well, I would love to help people. I'm very, very excited about outside in. I'm very excited about the knowledge graph. I'm very excited about building demand narratives. And you were a great student in my outside in class. And I appreciate the pat on the back. And let's keep going on by going on. What do you think, Pat?
Yeah. Hey, this is a collaborative effort. I eat the posts up for lunch that I see, and I just saw one this morning. So on the balance scorecard, because now you can, once you have the basics done, overlay the balance scorecard, and wow, now you have a C-level dashboard that allows people to deal with their business in real time rather than ERP time.
Well, and unfortunately, so many people are stuck in functional metrics versus the balance scorecard. I'm really excited about the work we're doing with Georgia Tech, looking at what drives value on the balance scorecard and by industry, and I can't wait to tell you about it, but it's not all done yet. So, you'll have to stay tuned.
I can't wait. I cannot wait, because everything, all the evidence is there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
all right, Pat, thanks for joining us today. And I appreciate your support, and let me know if I can help you. And I know you're always a great resource if people want to connect with you. And so I would encourage people, send you a direct message on LinkedIn, and they'll have a great conversation. Okay, until next time. Thank you, Pat. Okay.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye.
All right. Until next time, This is Lora Cecere with Straight Talk with Supply Chain Insights.